Well, hello to the First Baptist family and the Friends of First Baptist. This is our midweek update for April 6th, 2022, and this is our 3-2-1. 3 things I want you to know, 2 chapters in the Bible I would invite you to read, and 1 way I would ask you to pray this next week. And by the way, I always make just 3 real quick announcements. One of the best ways to keep up with what's happening at First Tulsa is to download the app, just our First Baptist Tulsa app. On it has the weekly announcements, it has teaching archives, it has other resources for your family, it has a Right Now media link. All that is embedded in the app, and so let me encourage you just to download that to your phone, and it'll keep you more informed. So, of course, we're coming up on Easter, so here's the 3 things I want you to know. The service of darkness, the Thursday before Easter, that is April 14th, 7 p.m., and it's going to be a very special time of remembering the sacrifice of Jesus. And then Easter Sunday morning, April 17th, we're having 3 services that morning, 8:30, 9:45, 11 o'clock. And then in between the 2 on that Saturday is our family extravaganza at our South Campus, the 61st and Mingo. Easter egg hunt, a lot of activities for the kids, just a great family time. Okay, so those are the big 3 things that I want you to know. 2 chapters in the Bible I would invite you to read. We are entering into the book of Leviticus. So we spent 12 or 13 weeks in Genesis, spent about 10 weeks in Exodus. Now we're not reading every chapter, but we're kind of sampling as we're going through and getting a feel for the big storyline. You can read more than just these 2 chapters, but we're going to spend about a month in Leviticus. And I often go back to what my old seminary professor used to teach me. All Scripture is inspired, but not all of it is inspiring. And so we often make fun of Leviticus. But if you understand its importance, it begins to make a whole lot more sense. 2 themes to Leviticus, and I'm going to ask you to read Leviticus 1 and 2 this next week. 2 themes in Leviticus to keep in mind. First is the holiness of God. That's a repeated theme throughout Leviticus. Be holy, for I am holy. Okay? The holiness of God is the sum total of all of God's characteristics that make God God and make Him so different from us. Okay? God's very different than us. So the holiness of God. And the second theme is that of worship. Worship is very important to God. And I know we've moved a lot to doing online worship and that, but there's something important about getting my person together, stepping out of my house, going to another place with other Christians, other followers, and worshiping God together. It's empowering, it's life-giving, it's important. And if we want to be holy as God is holy, worship is key to that. And so Leviticus, if you look at the word, just lop off the suffix, you have the word Levi, okay? The Levites, these are people in charge of the worship of God in the tabernacle that would become the temple, okay? So Leviticus 1 and 2, this is pretty simple. Chapter 1, I want you to pay attention to the sin offerings, the guilt offerings that people would bring. And I'll just kind of break this down really quick. If you look from verses 3 to 9, if you bring an animal from the herd, here's what you need to do. Verses 10 through 13, if you bring an animal from the flock. So the herd would be like a cow or a bull. The flock would be a sheep or a lamb. And then verse 14 on down to verse 17, it's you can bring birds as an offering as well. Everyone can bring something. If you're rich and you have a herd, you can bring something from your affluence. If you're kind of middle income, you don't have a herd, but you have a flock, you can bring something from there. If you're poor and you don't own animals at all, you can buy a small bird and bring it. Everyone can bring something. Everyone can contribute something. And there's a whole lot in there to be taught about generosity. It's not waiting one day until I hit it rich, then I'll really be generous. Listen, if you're not being generous today, you won't be generous then. But as it pertains to worship, God kind of scales this down where if you're rich, middle class, or poor, everyone can bring something. And we'll see this again in a couple of weeks. I believe we're going to cover the chapter that if a woman gives birth to a child and she can bring a gift to the temple, okay, it follows the same structure. And that's why when Mary and Joseph bring Jesus and they bring 2 doves, that's a sign that they were impoverished, but they could bring something to the worship of God. Okay? Chapter 2 really the same thing. This talks about grain offerings, and these were not so much for the forgiveness of sins. This was about bringing a gift to the temple or the tabernacle to support the priesthood. And so the whole community takes responsibility for the worship and the upkeep of the priesthood and the tabernacle and the temple. As everyone could give something for their own guilt, now they could contribute something for the upkeep and the maintenance and the advancement of tabernacle and temple worship. And there's a neat little kind of a little line that's going to slip past you if you're not careful. As you bring these offerings of bread, of grain, it says in verse 13 of chapter 2, season all of your grain offerings with salt. Don't leave the salt of the covenant of your Lord out of the grain offerings. Add salt to all your offerings. So if you're baking bread, and you know you're going to give it to the temple and give it to the priest for them to eat. By the way, the reason for that, all the tribes have an allotment of land except the Levites. The Levites' inheritance is the Lord. And so they were to serve around the temple, and the other people who were landowners would contribute to the Levites. So if you know you're breaking bread to the Levites, you say, well, I can kind of cut some corners here on the recipe, and salt is valuable, so I'll leave that out, and we'll give it to them, and they should be thankful for what they get. It's an example of don't take shortcuts, and don't give God what's less than your very best. Bring God your very best, and don't take shortcuts when it comes to the things of the Lord. There's a lot in here about giving and about generosity. See those principles. We worship very differently than what the Levites and the Israelites did around the tabernacle and the temple, but there's some principles here that we need to hold on to. God is holy. We need worship to connect with the holiness of God. Be holy, for I am holy. And we can all bring something. We can all take responsibility. We are to give God our best and not what's left over. Okay, so that's Leviticus 1 and 2. Read that this week. Ponder it. Look for those principles. The one way I'd ask you to pray this week is we have given out a card on Sunday mornings in our window ledges that as we get closer to Easter, to write on this card 3 names, people that you need to have a spiritual conversation with, and maybe you invite to church on Easter Sunday morning. Again, that's April 17th. That's an easy ask. It's an easy time of year to invite somebody to join you for worship. Take this opportunity. Pick up the card on Sunday. You don't need the card, though, right now to start praying for somebody who you know needs the Lord, needs a church home, needs some hope in their lives. Let's be ambassadors for Christ. The Lord bless you. Love being your pastor. I love you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.